So Luke 20, the end of Luke 20, verse 45, it says, "Then in the audience of all the people he said unto his disciples, Beware of the scribes, which desire to walk in long robes, and love greetings in the markets, and the highest seats in the synagogues, and the chief rooms at feasts, which devour widows' houses, and for a show make long prayers. The same shall receive greater damnation. And he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw also a certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites. And he said, Of a truth I say unto you, that this poor widow has cast in more than they all. For all these have of their abundance cast into the offerings of God. But she of her poverty has cast in all the living that she had. And as some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts, he said, As for these things which ye behold, the days will come, in the which there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." Let's pray. Lord, pray that you give us this morning eyes to see and to behold what you communicate to us through your text, and bring us in line with the gospel and in line with the way that you have designed life to work. I ask this in Christ's name. Amen. So, this is a 3-part text, what I read here. This is set in the last week of Jesus' earthly ministry before the cross. And in Luke chapter 20, it's just a series of theological arguments that the scribes and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law have with Jesus, and the Sadducees. These different religious sects in Judaism, they have all these ways that they're trying to trap Christ, either to find a reason to arrest him, or either to make him look stupid before the people, to discredit him. So they ask questions to him like, by whose authority do you do these things? And Jesus says, okay, what about John the Baptist? Was he from men or from God? And they said, we don't know, because they were fearful. And Jesus says, well, if you're not going to answer, I'm not going to answer your question either. He tells them the parable of the wicked tenants in the vineyard and how judgment was going to come upon them. And of course they got angry because they knew it was talking about him. Then they ask him this question to trap him. They say, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Because if he says no, then the Romans are going to think he's making a rebellion. If he says yes, then he's going to be in violation of the Jewish law. So they try to trap him. Then the Sadducees come to him and they tell him this crazy story. They tell him there was a man and he had a wife and he died, and then his brother took her as his wife, and then he died, and then his brother took her, and on and on and on, till 7 brothers had all been married to this woman. Whose wife will she be in the resurrection? See what a crazy question that is? And so Christ answers that, and then he answers so wisely that they don't ask him any more questions. But they're constantly, especially at this last week of his life, they're trying to trap him in his words. They're trying to have all these arguments and debates with him to discredit him. So Christ asks them one last question. He says, how can David, King David, 1,000 years ago, call the coming Messiah Lord if he's one of David's descendants? How's that? No one's able to answer. And so that's where we come at this passage in Scripture. And so after all this questioning, after all this debating, Christ gives a warning. He says, beware of the Pharisees. And then we see this teaching about the widow and her 2 coins, and then we see his teaching about the temple, which is going to be destroyed. So I don't think that this story about the widow is a story about giving. It's just not in the context that he's having all these debates, all these arguments, and then he says, well, stop, I want to teach you about giving right now. It doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense in that context why Jesus would do that. So he's going on telling them they don't recognize who the Messiah is, that the scribes are evil and inwardly evil, and the temple's going to be destroyed. But in the middle of that, he says, let me give you a lesson on giving. It doesn't make sense. So, as we analyze these three short clips, which all flow one after the other, because if you look at other Gospels, like I think Matthew and Mark, it's in the same order, that these things happen in the same order. So I think there's a reason that they're kept together like this. The scribes, the widow, and the destruction of the temple. What's the connection between all of them here? All right, let's look at the teaching on the scribes. Chapter 20, verse 45, we're told that of the scribes, it says Jesus, in the hearing of all his people, he says this to his disciples, beware of the scribes. Here's what they're like. They love to walk around wearing long robes. They love the greetings in the marketplace. They love the best seats in the synagogue. They love the seats of honor at a feast. All right, so let's break that down. They love wearing these long robes. Okay, the scribes were not a religious denomination, or like the Pharisees or the Sadducees were. They were a class of professionals. They were like scholars and teachers. They were the people who studied the law and copied the law and made other manuscripts of the law. So these people knew the Jewish law inside and out. They were the scholars and the professors of the law, the teachers of the law. So and because it's God's law, there's a status of spirituality that goes along with that. People look at them not only for their education, not only for their status, not only for their intellect, not only for their wisdom, they look at them for their spirituality. People automatically assume that because this guy is in the service of the law, in the service of the temple, in the service of transcribing the law and making copies of it, this person must be someone who's close to God. And so they loved the status that came along with that. And they did everything to accentuate that and draw attention to themselves on that basis. So Christ says that they love to walk around in these long robes so that everyone can look at them and marvel. You know when a scribe goes by, because he's the one with the nice robe, and you look and say, oh, there's a holy guy. That guy knows the law. That guy handles the law. That guy knows it inside and out. That guy's spiritual. The scribes love that attention. He says also that they love the greetings in the marketplace. Now, we don't have something similar to a marketplace. It's not like the supermarket. It's a place where business is done. It's a place where things are taught and spoken. People gather. And it would be kind of like, in our culture, think of Union Square Park, right? Where people go and they gather and there's markets and people hang out and people do poetry, they do art, they buy and sell, and people just exchange ideas, and college students gather. And so that's the idea of the marketplace. And they love to be well known in the marketplace. They love to walk into the marketplace and they love to have a greeting there. They love when people say, hello, Mr. Scribe, hello, Father Scribe. They love that attention. They love being reminded of their status. They love the best seats in the synagogue. In the synagogue, there was different seats that would be taken based on status. We don't have something like that here. Maybe these are the only best seats in the house. Maybe the front pews. But in that day, the synagogues had better seats and lesser seats, and they loved receiving the best seats. Why? Because then people would look at them. People would know who they are. Their status would be displayed. They love the seats of honor at a feast. They love to be invited to a feast and having someone say to them, here, come sit at the bridal table, right? You know, when there's a wedding, there's like the bridal party at the reception. They sit at one table and then all the guests sit around. Well, they love the seats of honor. Here, come sit in this better spot. You're a scribe. You have status. And so they love that recognition. But here's what Christ says about them. He says, in verse 47 of chapter 20, he says they devour widows' houses. And that's significant because in this society, a status came to a woman through a man. And so, when it says that they devour widows' houses, they're preying on the most vulnerable people in a society. People who have no recourse for justice. The people who have no means of an income. When a woman's husband dies and she becomes a widow, what does she have to live on except whatever inheritance her husband left to her, or whatever means of living he might have left? So maybe they have a cow, maybe they have a small farm, whatever it was, she has that little left to her. And so the fact that the scribes devour the widows' houses is just deplorable. It should cause us to say, whoa, wait a minute, this is really serious in Jesus' eyes. In our society, it's not like that. A woman's husband dies, she might mourn for a while, but she doesn't lose her means of income. She doesn't lose the ability to make income. She might get remarried. But it wasn't like that in their society, especially not for an older widow. Read the book of Ruth for that. And so they devour the widow's houses, and then for a pretense, they make a long prayer. So it's like this picture that they come from devouring the widow's house, and then so that no one suspects that they've done anything wrong, they start making a long prayer. And everyone hears their prayer. So that no one suspects that they do anything wrong, but Christ knows. And so the key word in this passage is that the key phrase is that they devour widows' houses. Okay, devour widows' houses. And that's what connects us to the next chapter. Look at it. Chapter 21, verse 1. Okay, so Christ is taught on the scribes, and then it says he looks up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury, and saw also a certain, what? What's the word? Poor widow, casting in their 2 mites. Do you see the connection here? That we've just been told by Luke writing this, that the scribes are known for devouring widows' houses. And then he tells us in the next scene, Christ looks up and starts talking about the widow. So it's like he's teaching about the scribes, saying they take advantage of widows, the most vulnerable people in society, and there's one now. Otherwise, why would Luke mention that she was a widow? Why would it be notable that she was a widow? Christ, looking from a distance, would just have seen her as an old woman. But no, it's noted that she's a widow because I think there's a connection between the earlier passage about the scribes and this passage about the widow. This is probably a woman who has had her house devoured by the religious class. Think about it like this. It says, Christ says in verse 4 that she casts in everything that she has to live on. Why doesn't she have anything else to live on? I wonder if it's because her home has been devoured by the religious class. Okay? She puts in 2 coins, and Christ says she put in more than all of the rich men. Because she's given out of her poverty. She's put in everything that she had to live on. So the temple, which is supposed to be a place of healing, a place of restoration, a place of justice, a place of reconciliation, a place of provision, a place of rejoicing. We see the destitution of this widow who is coming in and putting in everything that she has to live on. And the connection is that Christ has told us just a few verses earlier that the scribes devour widows' houses. And we see an example of that. A widow coming in and putting in everything that she has to live on. This is not a text about giving, primarily. Giving's an aspect in it, but there's something greater going on. It's an example of what this religious system has become. Let me show you that in the next verse. Verse 5, it says, "And some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts. He said, As for these things which you behold, the day will come in the which there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." You see what's happening? That the disciples are looking at the temple and looking at people putting in their offerings. And the disciples who have just wandered around with Christ for 3 years, and they come to the temple maybe once a year, twice a year. They're enamored by the beauty of the temple. They say, "Jesus, look at this temple. Look at all the gold. Look at all the precious stones. Look at the people giving their gifts. And this is what it's all about." And Christ says, "You're beholding all these gifts, but I tell you the truth, that judgment's going to come on this place. There's not going to be left standing one stone upon another. It's all going to be destroyed. It's all going to come crashing down. In fact, it's going to be burned with fire, because 40 years later, when this actually happened, the Romans burned Jerusalem. They burned the temple, parts of the temple,